Fenway Rundown, 1st of February, first of many in February. I'm Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam here. A happy truck day to all of you. What an unbelievable holiday on the baseball and Red Sox calendar. I was there today for truck day. If you're looking for coverage of it on MassLive, you're going to have to be looking for a while because Sam Kennedy's out of town and did not do his customary little availability on truck day. Craig Breslow was there, and I'm not interviewing Wally and Tessie. So that's just kind of how it's going to go. There was a little bit of a crowd. I think one of the great overdone things on our beat every year is judging truck day attendance in terms of interest in the team. What's that? What's that face you're giving me?
You volunteer to do this every year.
I think
And
it's a good
now
opportunity to
you're
hear
making
from.
it sound like I make you go and do this and
I
it's a
didn't
waste
make
of
you.
time.
I didn't say that at all. And again, folks, if you're not watching on YouTube, we're both smiling and giddy as always. Now, Sean
Giddy's
just
a stretch, but
yeah,
smiling, yeah.
probably. No, I'm fine going. I live closest to the ballpark of the three of us. That's fine. I'm fine to go over there, especially because you can get availability with Sam Kennedy or Craig Breslow. Today, that wasn't the case, and so we soldier on. 1 week before we descend upon Fort Myers on February 9th, next Monday, will be Alex Cora and Craig Breslow's first availabilities of spring training. I don't know what it is. It feels like it's come quicker than in previous years. It's February 2nd and we're already packing. I know it's just the way it is now with the WBC. Super Bowl Sunday is usually a travel day, and it will be again this year. For at least you and Chris, I'll be there Monday morning. But here we are, a week to go. We are not in spring training mode yet. I think the temperature dictates that. We're still in off-season mode, and we now have some Red Sox news to talk about, which we have not over the last couple of weeks. So, a Sunday trade for the Red Sox. Um, it's one that, you know what, let's give ourselves, and really me, our flowers for discussing on the Fenway
This,
Rundown
this
on
took
Friday.
way longer to get to than I thought it was going to.
Also,
I thought
yeah,
you were going to be shot out of a cannon
yeah.
talking about this.
I think that the Fenway Rundown on Friday really was telling you a lot of stuff, and it wasn't like reporting; it was actually guessing. But it was two guesses that were just absolutely on point. Number one, attaching David Sandlin in a salary dump. Uh, well, they did that, not to Yoshida, but to Hicks. And also, we were talking about Eugenio Suárez as a potential fit, which we will get to today. And I said, I think the market's going to collapse. And you said, what's the deal? And I said, one for 15, one for 16. That's what he got. I thought I was a low ball estimate by me at the time. Ended up right on the money. Anyway, Carolina over Duke on Saturday is next. So hopefully we have that going for us. And if you are one of the many people that's asked me to stop talking about my alma mater's basketball team on this podcast, I understand you
Good
don't
luck.
care, and I apologize profusely. Um, let's get to the trade first. Pretty simple to understand why they did it. Jordan Hicks and David Sandlin go to the White Sox. There's three players to be named later involved. Those will be for a podcast to be named later. And we have $8 million going from the Red Sox to the White Sox. That's $4 million of Hicks' salary in each of the next 2 years. A pitching prospect comes back in the form of Gage Zeal, who went to University of Miami. That should make the manager happy. Was a Yankees farmhand. Was traded for Austin Slater at the deadline. Now involved in this trade. He's not on the 40. The two guys they moved were on the 40. Really, it comes down to this. Zeal is a middle of the road prospect. The players to be named later don't matter. The White Sox wanted David Sandlin, and they took on $8 million of Jordan Hicks' salary for the next 2 years in order to obtain him, and threw in Zeal on the other side. That's what happened. That's what it comes down to. Your thoughts, Sean?
Well, I'm sort of torn because on one hand, if you have an unusable hunk of payroll, and that's what Jordan Hicks had become, 12 million this year, 12 million next. It only makes sense to unload him because he's taking up space. And it was clear that it wasn't going to work out for Jordan Hicks here. He made 20 something appearances last year, pitched horribly, really, with an ERA of like, what was it, 8?
Eight. Yeah,
Yeah,
looking at the line yesterday, somehow we watched all of it and it was worse than I think we both thought.
yeah, it was bad. And maybe he figures it out somewhere else, but it wasn't going to happen here. They're not in a position where they can carry a guy like that. They can't cross their fingers and hope he figures it out in June. This team's trying to win. They're trying to get back to the postseason. The White Sox are not there yet. And they have a little money after unloading some veteran players. So they saw this as a way of, frankly, as you said, buying David Sandlin, a middle to back end starting pitching prospect. So on one hand, you recognize that the Red Sox did the prudent thing. Stop trying to convince yourself that Jordan Hicks is going to help you at all. Bite the bullet and move along. They did that. Okay. The flip side to that is, should a big market team like the Red Sox be sacrificing young pitching prospects or prospects of any kind so as to lower their CBT? Because that's what this was about. The Red Sox, through the moves they've made, topped by the last one to get Ranger Suarez here, were in the second CBT threshold over 264, and they decided they didn't want to be there. I think ultimately we're going to determine whether this was a good or bad move, not on what Jordan Hicks does in the future or what Gabe Zeal does or doesn't become.
Gage.
It, huh?
I think it's Gage.
Gage, yes. That will never be important, but you're correct. Um, it will measure the efficacy of this in this way. Do the Red Sox spend that money elsewhere? Or was this just about getting below the second CBT threshold? You would hope, if you're a Red Sox fan, that they're saying to themselves, look, we're probably going to be over the second threshold at some point this season, whether it's one more ad here before the season starts or something done at the deadline to boost the payroll and improve the team for the final 2 months. If it was just budget cutting and trying to get under the CBT second threshold and stay there, then I'm obviously far less willing to give them credit for making that move.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are reasons to do it, and I just wrote this on the site. Beyond the money, I mean, really unclogging the pipes from a 40-man perspective and a bullpen perspective is also, I think, a secondary piece of this. They have two open spots. They'll have a third in a week when Houck can go on the 60-day IL. That's important instead of, having to DFA somebody they liked. I mean, they just had to trade Tristan Gray, Fenway Rundown alum. They clearly didn't want to do that as their first choice. And also just kind of clearing a path. We did the roster projection, talked about it on the last pod. Hicks being gone makes it easier to carry like Kelly to start the year or Ryan Watson, who they like, who has more upside. I think we both agree than Hicks. So I think it's a smart piece of business in a vacuum. It's always how they got there. A lot of people relitigating the Devers trade yet again yesterday, which of course is a piece of it. I don't really. Jordan Hicks to me was never really a piece of that.
Yeah,
That was
he
important.
was foisted on them
Yeah,
for the Giants' willingness to take all of Devers' money.
right.
They could have not acquired Jordan Hicks, not taken $12 million, but the Giants would have said, okay, you have to lop off, you have to be responsible for approximately $25 million of his remaining
Right.
money. They said, no, we don't want to do that. Give us a lousy reliever that maybe we can figure
Well,
something
I
out
mean,
with.
they did try to sign him 2 years ago, and they were like second in the race to sign him to this inflated
Yeah, but
4 year,
you'll
$44
agree
million
the
dollars.
only reason he came here was to offset
Yeah,
all the money going west, right?
right. Oh yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, they had the two options. They could have said, "We'll just pitch in the money, or we'll take a flyer on this guy." And I mean, you do that a thousand times. He's probably not going to pitch worse in any of the other 999 than he did in his time here. I mean, and they I think had designs on him. Potentially being a back end option down the stretch. Obviously, Whitlock emerged into that, and Chapman was better than you could have ever imagined. So the Hicks thing didn't kill them in the eighth or ninth inning. It's a guy they like, the repertoire, the stuff, the lab, all that stuff. But it just, Yeah, I mean that trade again. I tweeted it yesterday. The pecking order of what was important to them in this that trade was getting Rafi out of there. We don't have to discuss all that again. Both sides screwed up. Both sides are at fault. Both sides have a point in some ways. Part two was the money aspect of it, which Hicks is kind of part of, but not really. Part three, Kyle Harrison. Part four, Tibbs and Bayo. Jose, not Brian. And part
I
five,
would
Jordan
argue
Hicks.
that Tibbs was never really. I mean,
Yeah,
they wanted to get the other first baseman,
right.
uh,
Eldridge.
Aldrich, but they couldn't convince San Francisco to give him up. I mean, and they were ready to turn him around 6 weeks later.
Right.
So it was obvious that that was never a huge priority. It was a warm body,
Yeah. And I think, you look
and
at
and
these.
and a warm body moved to get Dustin May. This
Right.
was not okay. It's the third piece of the puzzle of a big deal we're doing. It was straight up for Dustin May,
Well, yeah,
whose
they also
value,
gave another Earhart who actually had a pretty good second half. So it's even worse.
yeah,
But I mean, there's all these things. I think, in all of that, what I look at as the second guess is, you know, did they get a horrible package for Rafi? That'll come. We'll figure that out based on what Kyle Harrison does. And again, it's just kind of like the Mookie trade, but in even bigger, bolder font. The money is player A in that trade, and you're, taking it off the
player
books.
A, B, and C. I
Yep.
mean, or
Yeah.
point
Right.
A, B, and C.
And then, Kyle Harrison is still kind of the prize of the four and the rest. So to me, it's like, there's a kind of revisionist history. It fits the idea of, oh, they're cheap and Rafi was a salary dump. If you're looking at it from that perspective, you're kind of missing the bigger picture, which there's a lot of angles. When you look at all of these things, the biggest second guess, the biggest screw up they made was, and this gets worse over time, their trade deadline was horrible in every way, capital H horrible, where, they panic moved for May at the end and had to give up, Tibbs, and that makes the Rafi trade look worse. And Tibbs and Earhart played well in the second half, and May was horrible and is already gone. Like, the more time that goes on, disastrous missteps by Breslow. I think he'd admit that. People there understand that. They were too focused on Joe Ryan, didn't pivot in time. We've gone over that. I think, like everything that's led up to the fact where they have this albatross of Jordan Hicks on the roster and have to trade a prospect to get rid of him. I mean, you can look at it. I choose to look at it yesterday as a smart piece of business and then look at the what's next. And I don't give them the benefit of the doubt that there's another, high dollar move coming. My takeaway would be that there is another salary dump move coming. We talked about Sandoval the other day. I stand by. I think Patrick Sandoval is going to get traded. Not insider stuff, just reading the tea leaves where you trade him, you get a piece back, whether it's a major league ready piece or not. The team takes on his whole deal just because he's seventh or eighth on your depth chart and you're not going to send him to AAA. Like, I could see that happening. And also, as always, keep, assessing these Yoshida options to get more money off the books.
Yeah,
It,
well, I was going to
I just
say,
don't know where they're going to spend, where are they going to spend all that?
well, they need an infielder,
Yeah.
whether that comes via trade or taking on a deal, whether it's
Right,
Horner,
but
whether
none of
it's
those guys are going to
Donovan. I
cost you
mean,
more than 12 million in 2026, right? I mean, there's Suarez
right,
was the only guy, and we'll get to him, of course, Eugenio, not Ranger, that would have been in that bucket of a high dollar
right.
acquisition.
But if you needed to attach David Sandlin, who, let's keep things in perspective. He's not a frontline starting prospect. I think most people regard him as a 4, maybe a 5 if things work out. But there's value to guys who are back end starters that you develop or acquire for very little, that bring value. But if you had to attach David Sandlin to get someone to take Jordan Hicks off your hands, what is it going to take to unload another 50% more of dead salary to move Yoshida? You
Yeah, what do
just
you have?
moved.
What do you have to attach to Yoshida? Roman Anthony.
Well, I think we can sit here and predict that that will not happen.
I know.
But
No, but
but if
your
it
point's
took
right.
that much to get them to accept 24 million, and you can make the argument that Yoshida has at least the chance to perform a little bit, probably better than Hicks is going to for the White
Yeah,
Sox this year or next. But it puts into perspective how costly it is to unload dead weight salary
right.
because it's gonna if it takes a player and a half of David Sandlin to move the salary and a half that goes with Yoshida, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's why I think Sandoval's the pathway there.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to necessarily take back any of Sandoval's money.
Right,
I
I
mean,
agree.
that's a reasonable number for a guy who's been a mid to back end starter, who's left-handed,
Hmm.
always value there. You may not get a whole lot in return, but I don't think you're going to have to retain some of it the way they did with Hicks.
I say have him shove for 3 innings against Northeastern and keep it moving. I mean, really, obviously, their health is the question mark with him. He did have setbacks related to the arm. Teams are going to want to see it. There's going to be scouts tracking him, and I think it's a good value move for some other team to who needs one of those guys. Obviously, there's a lot of free agent starters still out there, headlined by Framber and Gallen and Bassett and Giolito and Verlander and Scherzer and those types of guys. But once those guys are off the board, a team with a pitching injury in spring training can look at Sandoval as readily available, and I think they will. So, you know, like I talked about Sandlin as a guy who's not going to kill you organizationally if you move on from. Getting rid of Hicks is something that I think, with the roster the way it is a priority. Are they working backwards and having the dollar total inflate to bring it down? Yes, but like on the one hand, you can kind of relitigate all the stuff that got him here and be like, oh well, there's a series of unfortunate events. Of course, no one would characterize the Devers trade as a fortunate event. We've just discussed that, but I give them a little credit for. Look, I think yesterday's smart business, to get out from under Hicks. You know, I wonder what it would have taken to get a team to take all of the money, which I wonder if it was even in question. But again, the White Sox wanted Sandlin, effectively bought him. The Red Sox pitching pipeline is in a position now where, take a step back from, Tolley and Early remain, but you look at who is, no longer with the organization from that group of pitchers that was ready to go. And I know the
Morales,
Perales trade is a different category for sure because Bennett came back, but Perales
Priester,
fits. Well, yeah, Priester from last year, but in this offseason, Fitz, Dobbins, Perales, Sandlin, Brandon Clark, Fajardo. I mean, that's a big chunk. Um, and I think a larger point that you're starting to see crystallize here is this is where, Breslow has to stick his neck out and make sure he's keeping the right guys. This is the best thing Dombrowski ever did. He kept the right guys and traded the right guys. Um, if David Sandlin or Hunter Dobbins or Richard Fitz or Brandon Clark has a really good major league career and Peyton Tolley and or Connolly early are busts, that's going to be a huge knock on Craig Breslow's legacy. And I think, the industry and we and the Red Sox and other teams like Tolley and early over the rest of these guys for sure. But with that being said, he's got to make sure that these are the right moves because if Sandlin pops into an all-star or Dobbins or one of these guys, again, and Tolley and early aren't that, it's going to be a huge stain on a pitching guru and how he's looked at in retrospect.
right? Well, and already you can second guess the Priester move,
Yep.
realizing that it's not part of this class that got moved from the end of last season until now. But
You love Quinn Priester.
well, look, the guy pitched well for a division winner, a
Yep.
guy, a team that won the most games in the National League, all of baseball, really.
Yeah.
And at the time I wrote, wow, this is really a reflection of how the Red Sox had built up their pitching pipeline, that
Hmm.
they could afford to move this guy and get what they thought was good value for him in a draft pick and a lottery ticket. But, 9 or 10 months later, you can second guess that move. And you're right. If guys like Dobbins or Fitz or Clark or Fajardo or whoever is in this group, um, or now Sandlin, it is they've eaten away at their depth, and it's worth questioning.
We have non-Red Sox kind of breaking news into the Fenway rundown at this hour. Seattle is finalizing a trade for Brendan Donovan from the Cardinals. That eliminates one option. I think, at this point, the way I was looking at that one was that the Red Sox and Cardinals organizations know each other so well at this point that they probably would have been able to get it done if they were going to get it done. Katie Wu from the Athletics as a third team might be involved. I guess that opens up the possibility, but
Well, but we know that the Mariners have been in on Donovan, so
right,
it's not like they're going to spin him
yeah,
elsewhere.
right. So he's off the board. The guy, we'll get that in a second. The other big development from there's a three trade. Well, when in doubt, it's a three-team trade with Tampa Bay and the Mariners making their monthly deal. So the Red Sox not involved there. We'll see as we record, what'll come out there. Um, Eugenio Suarez, we talked a lot about the other day, and I think it's really, really, really clear um, to me, kind of like what exactly, happened here. I think it's abundantly clear to everybody. We were talking about, Suarez and the warts, and you were pretty against the signing or the potential signing, even at a really low dollar short term deal, all that type of stuff. I was trying to make the point that what if his market cratered to the point where he wasn't getting 3 for 45 or, 2 for 45 or three. There was one that said 3 for 63 early in the offseason. My point was if it craters to the point where he's taking 1 for 15 or 1 for 16, would you do it? You said probably still no. Now that we know that's what he got, it's really to me about the Red Sox not drawing a line in the sand on the deal or the value. It's them, drawing a line in the sand on the player. And I think once they got Ranger Suarez, no relation, and they're all in on this pitching, run prevention, defense model to have ground ball pitchers like Ranger and Gray and Bayo and have Eugenio Suarez at third was just not something they were going to do. And that's clear now because they could have gotten that deal done in a heartbeat. You would have guessed it. He'd probably, I know he spent a lot of time in Cincinnati and it's a
Yeah,
good hitter
he
ballpark,
played
but
there a number of years, and there's probably something attractive to wanting to go back there. There's probably something attractive about wanting to play for Terry Francona.
mhm,
Uh, a lot of fans might fail this trivia question, but the Reds were a postseason team last year. They didn't
right.
last long. They got run over by the Dodgers in the division series, but they did win a wild card and did get into October. So there's precedent for there being a successful team there. But yeah, all things being equal, particularly the ballpark, and I know the Reds ballpark is considered a good home run hitting ballpark, but it's not Fenway for a right-handed pull hitter. And
Yeah.
you would think that if he were given the chance of basically identical deals between those two, that he would have chosen Boston.
So that poses the question, would you have done it if you're the Red Sox 1 for 15 for
I
Eugenio
mean, the
Suarez?
problem is that he would obviously, well, not obviously, but you would think the Red Sox would need to have him do what the Reds are going to do, which is DH him. They have Cabrian Hayes in Cincinnati playing third base. We know that the scouting reports on him defensively have gone way down. And for a team looking to prioritize run prevention and defense, that would not have been an ad here. So what do you do with DH when you already have Yoshida and the difficulty of unloading that, and you have four outfielders, one of whom is going to have to rotate through there? It just while
And
he
Tristan
did
Casas, don't forget.
and Tristan Casas, uh, it was not. It didn't seem like a good fit here anymore. So
Yeah.
I understand why they passed.
Yeah. I mean, it's just they like the deal is palatable. You're really it's pretty, clear you're going to get 40 home runs unless he just is takes a step back in the power department, which, you're going to get 40, 45 home runs for 15 million. And are you willing to weigh that against a crazy strikeout rate that got even crazier down the stretch with Seattle and poor defense at third? And with the pitching staff the way it's constructed, they took themselves out of the race. They weren't outbid. They did not offer. They didn't want him. And It was clear that he was a fallback option at the beginning of the offseason as they were pursuing Bregman and some of these other guys, but they did not want this player. And, I guess you could see why. I mean, if he has a, 50 home run year, like people are going to say, wouldn't that look great in the middle of the Red Sox lineup? But they knew what they're passing up. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
if
you've got three elements here: defense, strikeouts, and power.
yeah,
Two of them are overwhelmingly negative.
yeah,
And yeah, he would give you the power bat that I've been saying that they have not addressed, and they still haven't. And it's likely at this point they're not going to, at least to start the season. They
mhm,
may get somebody to be an infielder and play second or third, but he's not going to have anywhere near the power that Suarez has.
right.
But in all likelihood, he's going to make better contact, whoever it is, and he's going to provide better defense.
I did think as we wrap up, then the return's not out. I don't think on this trade as we're recording, but Brendan Donovan to Seattle. I don't think that we um, thought Brendan Donovan was going to end up here. Um, any just initial thoughts to him not landing with the Red Sox?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been hard for two teams to make three trades in the same offseason.
Yep.
Um, I think you're right that they almost knew
And
each
four
other.
since the deadline.
Yeah, that uh, you know they know each other well. Heim knows the system well. Um, Breslow was in that division for a while, so he knows the Cardinals pretty well. But the old saw in football, it's tough to beat the same team two or three times in a year. I think applies here. It's tough for two teams to make three trades in the span of a few months.
Yeah. And that is basically what happened. So we'll see what the return is. Seattle, Tampa, and the Cardinals making that move. We'll have probably one more pod before we head down, and then, of course, pods galore from Fort Myers.